Hello, everyone! Bora lá para nossa segunda entrevista do nosso podcast e hoje aqui com a nossa convidada internacional, a minha grande amiga Susan Hawkins. E eu vou ler um pouquinho da bio da Susan para vocês conhecerem a trajetória dela, a carreira profissional e o que a Susan trabalha hoje em dia. So, Susan, welcome to our podcast. Such an honor and a pleasure. And let me tell my listeners something a little bit about you. So Susan is very passionate about education, particularly that which allows people to step out of their safe places. By heart and profession, she is a teacher. Her experience is broad, from teaching young children to those at the university level. Most recently, she has worked with international students, refugees, and immigrants who wish to learn English. At the same time, Susan moved into the world of marketing and recruiting and set up a boutique international education agency, English Link Recruiting. Being fortunate to travel around the world, she's found herself falling in love with Brazil. E é por isso que ela é a nossa convidada de hoje, né? Porque ela se apaixonou pelo Brasil, pela cultura, pela feijoada, pelas pessoas, principalmente churrasco, caipirinha, bolo de cenoura. And now she's a student of Português. Olha que legal, a Susan também estuda português. Susan is excited to share her language journey. It's an honor for her to be part of this podcast with such accomplished people as Douglas, next interviewers, Manu and Eva. So, Susan, thanks again for being with us. Such an honor and a pleasure. And let's start with our first interview. So let's discuss about your journey here in Brazil, your experience. So how many times have you been to Brazil? Do you know?
I think I know. I tend to lose track of that kind of thing, but I think it's about 12 or 13 times.
Wow.
Yeah. It just keeps calling me back.
So is this the reason why you decided to start learning Portuguese?
It's one of the reasons, yes. I think that it's extremely important for people that are doing a lot of traveling, who are fortunate to do a lot of traveling, to know how to communicate in the language of the country where they're visiting. And I found that there were certain words that were, very similar. Hi, how are you? Cerveja,
Pizza.
things like that. Exatamente. So I just felt that I wanted to communicate better. And also, if I learn Portuguese, then people who are living in Brazil and wish to learn English can sense and see that anybody can do this.
Fantastic.
Anyone can learn a language. If I can do it, you can do it.
And did you struggle to find people who can communicate in English here in Brazil, in the places where you have been? So is it another reason why you decided to learn at least a little of Portuguese?
Absolutely, it was. Yes. In some places that I went, particularly in areas in the countryside, there were people with whom I could not communicate or could communicate only a little bit. Do you know what's interesting? It wasn't usually the young people. Most of the young people I met didn't want to speak Portuguese with me. Didn't want.
They want to practice English, right?
Speak only anything but English. So that was a complication, but just a little one. Yes, that you're absolutely correct. In the smaller centers, and fortunately, I've been to a number of them. It's a problem for communicating in English. Yes.
Oh, very nice. And do you know the percentage of people who can speak English in Brazil? Have you ever seen this information before?
I do not know that. Do you know?
I do. So
Okay.
just to shock people who are listening and seeing us, around 5% of people here in Brazil can speak English accurately, like in terms of with an advanced level that they can read, they can listen, they can speak, and also write in English in a very advanced level. So that's why
5%.
that's why you struggled a lot to see to find people who could talk to you in a fluent way. I would say that.
Yes. Wow. I didn't know that.
And in this process of learning a second language, as you have been facing right now, so is it possible to become fluent without leaving your own country?
Well, I'm not fluent yet. I mean, I always hope that I am, but there are barriers for me in that my head. I know what to say, but sometimes I can't say it when I have to have a conversation. However, absolutely, you can do that. There are so many opportunities for people that are not able to travel for whatever reason to stay in their home countries and learn English. Absolutely. So many devices, so many programs, so many apps, so many amazing schools and teachers such as you who are able and ready and able and competent to teach English. Yes.
So now that you are working also with refugees and immigrants, when they arrive in Canada, for example, basically, what would you say about their English level?
It depends on where they're coming from.
Okay.
Because refugees, of course, are a little bit different from English language learners, from alumnos, different from students. And then immigrants, of course, are different entirely from that. So it depends on where they're coming from. If a Nigerian, for example, comes to Canada, they can speak English.
Oh, nice.
If somebody is coming from, I don't know, another
Ukraine,
country, Moldova,
nowadays,
Russia,
right?
whatever.
Like the reality about the war, right?
They don't necessarily have the same language ability. I think because of media, television, Hollywood, people, if you have a television, you can access this. So people might come with some English. Yeah. Generally speaking, in order to be an alumno here, in order to come as a student to for example, to a language school, you need to have a little bit of English. To come with no English whatsoever would be extraordinarily complicated.
Yes, this is something that I would mention, because most of the students, when they want to travel abroad to study English, for example, this is what you do, help them to go to Canada, to universities in Canada, and also language schools. They usually ask me that, Sa, can I go with a very elementary level, like just understanding some words, something like that? And I always advise them, like, as better as you could go, as better you are going to come back in terms of level, I would say. So do you feel the same?
Oh, yes, I think that's very wise advice, very good advice. Take some, if you're planning to come, and let's use Canada because that's where I am. If you want to come to Canada, prepare yourself. When you come, you have to be prepared financially. You have to be prepared emotionally. There are many, many steps, as we all know. A big one is to prepare yourself with your language ability. So you need to take some classes. I mean, go online, Duolingo, whatever. Duolingo has saved my soul so many times. Do you know, Sabrina, it's a bit of an anniversary for me today, because today I have 750 days without a break on Duolingo.
Oh, yay! Congratulations.
I'm sure that's not very many, but for me, it's a big deal.
But this is one of the main advice that I usually give to my students: persistence, right? Like
absolutely,
studying every day, don't give up, try to find your self-motivation, and don't give up, right?
Não desista.
Não desista.
Não desista.
Never.
That's my dica. Não desista.
And this is what people sometimes they get demotivated during the process and they want to, I will start. And after a short time, they stop. And after they start again. And they are in this looping, you know? Like they never can reach their goal because they don't persist.
Oh, persistence. You're so right with that. The other thing that goes, in my opinion, with persistence is consistency.
Consistency, definitely.
Be consistent every day, even if it's just for a few minutes, even if it's just, let's say 5 minutes is all you have. Every day, do something. Yeah.
And what about the other languages? Is just Portuguese that you are trying to learn, or have you ever tried any other language?
Well, boa pergunta. Boa pergunta. No, in Canada, we have 2 official languages.
Yes,
we have
definitely.
English, have French. So every student who goes to school in Canada must learn French or English for a period of time. So yes, French is something I need to spend more time on it. For Canadians, if you don't work or live in French Canada, it's difficult to continue with that language. My background, my family background is Swedish, and I do have quite a desire to learn a little bit of Swedish. I think that is important for my culture, my history, my backstory, I guess you could say. The other thing I was going to mention when you talk about this is, for me, when I would go to another country that is not English speaking, I always like to learn maybe 5 things to say in that language. Always please, always thank you, always how are you, and always a response, I am fine. So if you can do those things, I think, then pretty much in another country, especially traveling, you will be okay. Like please and thank you will take you everywhere.
Awesome. And do you have, like, curiosity, do you have any funny stories of yourself trying to communicate in Portuguese and the person like couldn't understand and you got something wrong according to your previous order, or you got lost?
Oh my goodness. I have a lot of stories. How much time do we have?
2 hours, it's okay.
Yeah, no, I know. So I guess, well, where to start? I think maybe the biggest thing for me is when I made the decision to learn to speak Portuguese, and I would arrive at Guarulhos, São Paulo, and I would get in a taxi. I would start to talk to the taxi driver. The poor taxi drivers of São Paulo had to listen to my very, very fractured, poor Portuguese as I tried to communicate where I wanted to go. And I had to go, one time I had to go to, let me see, Frecaneca, where my hotel was. And I messed up so badly, I ended up on the other side of the city. And when we got there, there was no hotel. And I remember saying, Anyway, that was only one example. Do you know, though, there's one thing I never get mixed up. The first thing I learned, cerveja, por favor. I never get that mixed up.
Universal language.
Universal language, exactly. Yeah.
And what went wrong and right during your learning process? So, for example, it doesn't matter if the student is learning English or learning Portuguese like you are doing right now. So sometimes there are some things that they should do, right? And some things that they should not do. So which ones would you say, for example?
Well, I think maybe we've already covered part of that in the consistency.
Yeah.
Study every day. My thing right now as a Portuguese learner is to try to find someone here in Canada, well, in Victoria, where I live, with whom I can speak Portuguese. I know there are lots of Brazilians here. That's not a problem. And I have to be careful because the Portuguese no continente é diferente para o Brasil. So there are people here who are from Portugal who will talk my ear off, but it's a bit different. So one thing is to find somebody to speak to. The other thing I think is to have a goal out there. What's your motivation? Why are you learning this language? Is it because you want a better job? And I know from my Brazilian friends that it is maybe the biggest motivator for students to learn English, so that in the future, when they come back to Brazil, if they've come to Canada, when they come back, they can present themselves as English speaking. And that helps their company open up to all kinds of opportunities for them and for the company. It's a good thing.
Have you ever met a student who went to Canada, for example, to learn English, and the person arrived like with a very low level, and when the person left, wow, it was very talkative, could communicate, could speak everything. Did you have this experience?
I have, but it depends. It completely depends on how long they stay.
To be merged,
so, for
right?
example, exactly. So a person comes and they want to learn English, which is wonderful. If they can stay for 4 weeks, fabulous. If they can stay longer, 4 weeks, not 4 weeks, 4 months or 5 months or whatever, it's going to make a huge difference. We both know that.
Yes.
The longer you are immersed, the better your language will be, and the better your understanding of the culture.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And it's not only the language itself, like you said, it's the culture, right?
Exactly.
Because it's everything included in the process, like learning the culture, because you learn how to say some slang, some idioms, some different expressions that if you are not studying the culture of the country, you cannot learn the language.
That's right. Very good. Exactly.
Oh, awesome. So, Susan, thank you so much for being with us today. It was an amazing interview. Such a pleasure seeing you again, and also listening your experience learning a second language as well. So it's fantastic to see how motivated you are, mainly with Duolingo and the other steps. So feel free to call me to talk in Portuguese to practice.
I will. You may regret saying that to me. You may regret.
No. I will never regret that. So it's a pleasure, and we can exchange. You correct me and help me with my English, and I help you with Portuguese.
Oh, that sounds like a fantastic idea. Thank you, Sabrina.
We have a deal.
We have a deal.
So we are waiting for you here in Brazil. So next time that you will be traveling here, for sure, we are going to have a face-to-face interview. I wish.
Sounds great. Me too.
And see you next time.
See you next time as well. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.